This video is a proposal presentation for the project of Glenburn Field Development. Glenburn Field lies above two reservoirs or so-called pools. These pools are Madison Pool and Dakota Pool. Since Dakota Pool has no production data, this study will be concentrated on Madison Pool. The field is located in North Dakota, and the figure indicates its location. The field has been producing since 1958 and is currently being water flooded as secondary recovery. The scope of this project is to determine what is the next step for this field. So after the water breaks through, should we cease or continue production? If continue, should we keep water flooding and produce oil with viscous drag or try a tertiary recovery? What type of tertiary recovery would that be and how profitable? The productive formation of this reservoir is a Mississippian age carbonate rock that is mainly composed of Madison limestone, some dolomite and anhydrites. Hydrocarbon accumulations are mostly in stratigraphic traps with some structural and combination traps. For most carbonate reservoirs, wettability tends to be an oil phase wettability or a mixed wettability due to the mineralogy of carbonates. Carbonate rocks have also a higher degree of heterogeneity compared to sandstones. These two characteristics lead to a lower recovery factors than sandstones. Madison Pool is believed to have a 27 to 28 API oil, which is considered a medium crude oil type with medium density and viscosity. Heavier oils require more time and investments to produce due to their high viscosity. Enhanced oil recovery techniques provide an unconventional methods to extract hydrocarbons and increase recovery factors. Some examples of EORs are immiscible gas flooding, thermal injection, and miscible gas flooding. One of the most commonly used EOR is the miscible gas flooding technique. It is used to overcome capillary forces as injectant is mixed with oil, making a lighter single phase. This method is best for light hydrocarbons and produces 15 to 40% of original oil in place. Miscible flooding depends strongly on wettability, as this figure illustrates. All EOR gases have a very low viscosity compared to reservoir oil, even at high pressures. Carbon dioxide has less than 1/10 of oil viscosity, leading to a very high mobility ratio. So unless it's miscible with oil, sweep efficiencies and therefore recovery factors will be very low. For carbon dioxide to become miscible with oil, pressure must be higher than the minimum miscibility pressure. If that happens, oil and carbon dioxide will mix, making a single phase. The oil density and viscosity will decrease, and also the interfacial tension between oil and water will decrease. When observing the existing well pattern for Glenburn Field, it appears that wells do not follow a certain pattern, although it seems like a 9-spot. 9 spots are considered the least optimal to recover oil. Well patterns can play a significant role in increasing the recovery factors if planned according to geology and hydrocarbon interactions in any given field.
An enhanced oil recovery technique we may decide to use in this project is CO2 injection. In a study of another Williston Basin field, the Sanash field, engineers were curious of the recoveries of hydrocarbons with different scenarios. If you look on the screen, you'll see a map of North Dakota and the locations of the Glenburn field and Sanish fields in respect to each other. They're about 80 miles apart. So the wells reached 50 barrels per day within a 30-year period with no EOR. So 2 more tests were done, and they did constant EOR which was CO2 injection, and then they waited and then they injected CO2. And they found that the constant CO2 injection was more favorable for this field, and that when you drill 4 injection wells in this area compared to 2, the recovery factor was 30 instead of 18. So we may use this for comparison to the Glenburn field, use this study. The previous study can provide useful insight to what our options will be to enhance our oil recovery in the Glenburn field. Some questions we must ask ourselves include, if we use CO2, how costly will it be? How much does it cost to drill injection wells in this area of North Dakota? How many injection wells are best? We can use that study to help us. When we decide to start the EOR, whenever it may be, what will be the predictive value of the hydrocarbons? And that's the graph I have on screen here. It shows the forecast for crude oil prices till 2050, and it shows the predicted and a high value and a low value. So we can use this whenever we plan to start our EOR. We can kind of guess a low and a high value, if we will make a profit or not, and at what price we will make a profit at, and if it is if EOR and CO2 injection is a go or not. On this screen, you will see the cost of a generic CO2 injection job. The most expensive part of it is the CO2 costs. It costs $2 per million cubic feet to purchase it and 70 cents per million cubic feet to recycle it. In this figure, they use $70 per barrel oil, much higher than our 55 barrel per oil today we see. It is not profitable in today's market, but it would be in a higher market. So we need to see when we would start our EOR and our CO2 injection, and we need to see what the forecasts say oil might be at that point in time, and we will see if it was profitable or not, and whether to go with the CO2 injection job or not.
Some environmental concerns arise when discussing CO2. In recent years, global warming has become a major concern due to rising sea levels and climate changes. As a result, many are focusing on the possibility of using enhanced oil recovery as a long-term anthropogenic CO2 storage application. Storage of CO2 from enhanced oil recovery is governed with tight restriction from the EPA. Permits issued by the EPA require sites to be managed in a way that will prevent CO2 from migrating into drinking water aquifers and contaminating groundwater resources. The University of Texas Gulf Coast Carbon Center has studied the longest-running EOR site in the world in Scurry County, Texas. This site has been injected with over 175 million tons of CO2, and no evidence was found that CO2 escaped the EOR site or contaminated groundwater resources. An optimistic approach may be that CO2 in enhanced oil recovery has a direct environmental benefit. Commercially available CO2 from industrial power plants can be captured and used in oil recovery operations, the benefit being that they will not be released into the atmosphere. Oil reservoirs can be used as a potential storage of CO2 by targeting portions of the reservoir not usually accessed by EOR strategies. Near the base of the reservoir, there is often a zone that is transitional between oil saturation and water saturation and is generally considered to be non-economic. This part of the reservoir is gaining interest for increasing storage capacity and also for the possibility of recovering oil previously considered unrecoverable.
One of project management's most important roles is defining the project's scope. Here, our scope is to safely and efficiently increase the production in Glenburn Field through tertiary recovery techniques. But we will mainly be focusing on carbon dioxide injection. Based on our research of similar fields, we have chosen to test CO2 injection using a 4-well injection system. We have reason to believe that this 4-well approach could increase recovery factor by 10 to 12% compared to a 2-well injection system. Here's our Gantt chart that portrays the necessary tasks to begin a CO2 injection process, and about how many days each would take to complete. The longest task to finish would be drilling the injection wells, which is around 30 days. In total, we should be able to complete the introduction of CO2 as a new enhanced oil recovery technique in 4 months. Some of the risks associated with this project include CO2 injection is not always a beneficial enhanced oil recovery technique, especially at lower pressures. Also, in order to implement this new technique, production must be stopped for a time and requires new equipment to be introduced. To keep the crew safe, signs warning of pressurized gas will be posted, and the workers will be encouraged to speak out if they suspect a gas leak.
At this time in the project, we assumed our budget to be $0 because we were really not making anything. We're more of determining a plan, and our costs for this project are low. The costs we've encountered already are the cost of data, which is the North Dakota portal and the SPE journal. Both of these are covered by the LSU department and included in our fees, so we have not paid out of pocket for this yet. If other costs arise, we will budget accordingly and we will accommodate that.